Hey guys, Chris at the Ultimate Recycler. We're just heading out to the local transfer station with a load of old e-waste that I don't want. There's TVs, there's vacuums, keyboards, some cheap power tools, a steam mop, lots of printers, all stuff that's really of no value for me as far as getting e-waste out of, and stuff that wasn't worth fixing, too badly damaged, or just simply no value. Even if it is in working order, like printers for example. I just have the one large CRT TV in the trailer today, so only a bit of a light load. But I like to run out the tip to the transfer station every 2 or 3 weeks, depending how much stuff I've got to get rid of. And they're nice enough to let me have a look in the crates out there and see if I can find some stuff to repair or some stuff for good e-waste value. So let's go out, get rid of this, and have a look at what they've got in the crates. So we're at the transfer station now. The crates are all pretty full. They're due to be emptied this week, so I've timed it pretty good. However, there's not a lot of stuff in here of any value. Large speakers, lots of flat screen TVs, vacuums, heaps of microwaves, and I've already put some of my printers on top. But I have got a few bits and pieces to have a play with. There's a PC and a server, and we'll just come out here, have a look in the back of the ute. So there's a set top, I think it might be a satellite receiver or something. A little GE retro 1970s clock radio I might try and fix up. It might even still work. It's in good cosmetic condition. And a large server. So I've got a bit of good stuff to scrap out, but not huge value. Anyway, it's always worth a look. You never know what you're going to find. Back home now. The transfer station's only about just under 10 minutes out the road, so it's not far, and it's an easy country road drive. Before I left, I did spot these couple of items in one of the crates. Now I grabbed this one because it's pretty cool. I haven't actually seen one like this before. It looks like it might be 1970s, wood grain sort of finish. It's a AM/FM stereo car radio and a CB, which is pretty cool. I don't know much about it. Unfortunately, the main part of the knobs weren't there. I did have a bit of a look, and there's no microphone for it. But it's worth bringing back to do a bit of checking. And there was also in the same box an Electrophone CB. So I don't expect that's going to be worth much, but I thought I'd grab it anyway. It's just easy to throw them back in the e-waste if they're of no value. So we'll check them out on eBay and see if we can find out any information on them. Alright, so here's the spoils of our treasure hunt in the crates out at the transfer station. I'll go through them one at a time, and we'll have a look at why I grabbed them and what I'm going to do with them. Alright, we'll start with these CBs. I checked this one just online. Even in going condition with a microphone, one only sold for $10, and I did notice that one's missing a button. So that's really not worth even trying to get going. So we'll pull the cover off that and see exactly what's in a CB radio and see if there's any value for us. I looked up this one. It's a Royce, and I think it says on the top, if I remember, 1975, manufactured in 1975. So I was about right with the era. I did find a couple online. There was some sellers asking quite a bit. One guy in the States was asking 125, and it was untested. I don't think they're necessarily worth that, and the fact that I found a few of them around tells me they're not overly rare. But it's cool, and I did see an example of what the knobs look like, and I did notice a couple of YouTube videos on these, so I might have a look at those at some stage. I don't know if they're just sort of rating their ability as a radio or whether they're doing restorations. But if I was to put that one in the shop as it is, untested, I'd just probably put $20 on it. So in that respect, it was worth grabbing. I'm not going to scrap it. I'm always drawn towards vintage items. So I'm going to actually put that in a box at home, and it may feature on my channel as a restoration project at some stage. Because the wiring's intact, there's no real damage other than being a bit grubby. It will clean up fine. I have the speaker wire, and they're labelled. There's the antenna for the radio and the antenna for the CB. I may not be able to test the CB part because I don't have an antenna, and I'm not sure what sort it would take, but I can certainly see if I can get the radio going. So that one will possibly be it's a keeper for now, possibly a restoration down the track. as is this one. Now I grabbed this, again I'm drawn towards vintage stuff, and it is cosmetically in pretty good condition. There's no cracks, no bad damage, it's got all its knobs. It looks like it hasn't been abused or anything. So there's a fair chance it may go. I haven't tested it yet, but I think I'll do a video on that as well as a restoration project. So those two basically, no real value now, but they're keepers to do a future job on. If I was to put that in the shop untested now, I'd probably put $10 on it, and I'm sure someone will buy it, probably for similar reasons. But going, I did check eBay, and quite a few models, all similar era. And I think this is a 70012. Don't know if it had a date code. Here we go. Now that possibly means, oh look, I'm not sure how they coded, but I'd suggest a 6, maybe 76. I don't think it's in the 80s, it looks more 70s to me. But I did see a few of them, similar models. The wood grain look sell for around about $30 odd. One made a bit more, but they were selling. So, you know, it's old enough now to be collectible. So that'll be a project down the track. So no return at the moment, but certainly worth grabbing for future projects. That one, we'll see what's in it shortly. This one is a, I thought it was a satellite box. It's actually a tuner with a hard drive, TV tuner. And depending on the size of the hard drive, they were selling for quite a bit. So I'll take the cover off and just make sure everything's intact and undamaged in there. We'll find out what size hard drive it is. And I didn't get a remote with it. That's the trouble with the stuff in the crates. Usually the remotes either aren't thrown out with them, or they sort of find their way to the bottom of the crate and I can't get them out. It's a little knocked around at the front, but half the time where it looks damaged, you can sometimes peel the plastic, because often the plastic things are left on there from new. Look at that. And if we peel that off, the front's actually going to look almost brand new. So thank you, whoever it was, for leaving that plastic on. If that works, I'll try and give it a bit of a test. If it works, I'll throw it on eBay. I saw them make well over $100 a few times. Depends on the size of the hard drive, and we don't have a remote, but it's got to be much better than scrap metal. So we'll eBay that one and we'll see how we go after a test. Now the PC, I'm just going to scrap out. We'll do that on camera for this one, and it'll give us something to look at. It'll be pretty standard, I would think. And I thought this was a server, but it's actually, I think it's just a big UPS. And the batteries, I think half of them have been removed, and I did note somewhere it said it was 55 kilos or something, which is extremely heavy. But half of the batteries have been taken out, or maybe all of them, I'm not sure. But I haven't actually pulled apart a UPS, so we'll pull that apart as well and we'll see what's inside it, see what value we get for it as far as e-waste stuff goes. Alright, what do we start with first? Let's have a look at the CB player over here. So let's see how much value we can get out of a CB radio. Now we'll take some screws out of the sides. And we'll see what's inside. I don't expect there's going to be much as value. Yeah, it's a typical vintage looking circuit board. We have, oh, that looks like there's some issues there. We have one IC chip, but really there's a couple of transformers, but really there's no value. That circuit board's only a low grade. And if we can get into the other side, that's just the back of the board. So there's really no value in there. I might just leave the chip out, and the rest of it can go back into to my box to go back to the e-waste next time I'm out there. I might keep the speaker. I don't mind the vintage speakers. Okay, yeah, that looks pretty clean. It's a vintage 16 ohm 1 watt, handy for a transistor radio restoration or something. The coil appears to move alright, freely. Interestingly though, I just noticed the wires have been clipped off, so someone's been in here, and it would have really presented a problem if I'd tried to get it going, obviously, with no speaker wires. Anyway, that's solved that one. We'll keep the speaker. This can go back out to the transfer station. Next, let's have a look in the Topfield digital recorder and see if there's a good size hard drive in it. Okay, it looks nice and clean in there. The hard drive is a 500 gig, so it's not super large, but if this thing's in working order, it's going to be worth a lot more as a goer than it is for scrap. So I'll do a bit of checking again on that size hard drive, and I'll give it a test as best I can, and we'll throw it on eBay and see how we go. Now let's have a look at this big PC. It's quite a large, heavy one, so I don't know what's going to be in it other than normal computer stuff. It has got a lock here which I don't have a key for, so we'll have to give it a bit of encouragement. There we go, we're in. Alright, what have we got in here? We've got some RAM, CPU, there's no slot cards, but otherwise it's all intact. Oh, there's two hard drives. So I'm not sure what size they are. We'll get them out and we'll have a look, see if there's any parts that are saleable. Otherwise we'll just put them all in the scrap. Alright, the RAM looks like they're 2 gig, so yeah, look, I'm not sure if they're saleable or not. I've got a box of 2 gig ones in the shop, and sometimes they sell just for a couple of bucks, so better than scrap. That's a power supply out, not much value in these, but there's quite a bit of wire which I'll chop off. And the fan is a large size. I might keep that for a future project. And 2 hard drives with 320 gigs each. Yep, so they're too small to be saleable. We'll put them in the scrap. And we'll take the motherboard out. And the motherboard, it's not going to be anything particularly good. I might just check the numbers on eBay just to make sure it's not a rare one, or I don't think it's a gaming computer, so it'll most likely just go in the box for motherboards. We'll get the CPU off it, of course, and we need to take the battery out. Now we're taking the front panel off because then that gives me a nice totally clean steel case which I can use to fill with other bits of steel. Makes it easier to take all the small steel to the scrapyard, so I find them handy to use as cavities for bits of steel. And we'll get the rest of the wire out, and we'll have to clean up the wire with take all the plugs off it to get good value for that. We'll take these bits off this front cover, and the rest of it is ABS plastic which can go in the recycle bin as long as it's clean and pure. So here's our completed scrapped out PC. We'll assess everything at the end of this video, and I'll get my notepad out and we'll make a few notes to see what value we got. But you can see we've got the case and plastic and wire and some hardware, a little bit of rubbish and all the bits and pieces. And so what we'll do next is we'll get into that underneath there, we'll get into that UPS and scrap that out, and then we'll assess all our components we have left and see what value we've got. So let's crack this case open and see what's left inside this UPS. Okay, cover should come off now. There we go. Oh, okay, well all the batteries are gone, but we have a really good chunky power board here, and looks like there's some massive cast aluminium heat sinks under there. So there we go, it's a lot of big copper coils, transformers, huge capacitors. There's not much scrap value in capacitors, but underneath that cover there looks to be a whole heap of heavy duty heat sinks. So UPS being a universal power supply, they're built very strong and rugged. They obviously carry a fair bit of current, so there's good heavy wiring. Alright, so we'll dismantle this and get this big power board out and see what we can salvage off it. I've got all the screws out, so the board should lift out now. It's one huge board. There we go, look at that. Quite a lot of weight in it. Now, I'll just get a weight on it because as it is, it's classed as a low-grade power board or a low-grade board, and they only pay for base metal recovery, so they would get the aluminium, they'd get the copper, and there's various other metals. There's going to be minute traces of precious metals amongst it, but it's not classed as a mid-grade or a high-grade board, and they'd only pay about 20 cents a kilo for that. So I'll put that on the scales and actually see what it weighs before we touch it. And what we have left is the case. It's all steel. Oh, there is a plastic sleeve here, we can take that out. The rest of it's all steel. It's quite heavy. It had to be strong, of course, because it had a lot of weight in it with batteries. So that would go to the scrapyards as light gauge pressing steel or shred. And because it's clean, we'd get a reasonable price. Now, I'll weigh all the shred up at the end, all the pressing steel, because we had the computer case and we had a few other brackets I took out of this. And we'll see what that's all worth to take to the scrapyard as clean steel. So there's that big power board sitting on the scales. It actually weighs 5 kilos, so there's a fair bit of weight in all that. Value wise, as I said, around about 20 cents a kilo. It's going to fluctuate depending on price of copper and aluminium and that sort of stuff, but at 20 cents a kilo we're looking at $1. So $1 return on a large board. I've mentioned previously in other videos when I'm doing e-waste scrapping that I don't save low-grade boards simply because they take up so much room to get a relatively small amount of value, and storage is a problem, and I've got to cart them an hour or more to Melbourne to sell them. So I'm going to pull a few bits off this, obviously the copper coils, and if the aluminium heat sinks come off well, I'll take them off. So I might just sort of micro scrap that a little bit now, and we'll weigh up what I've got left, and then you'll see how much I've improved on my value. So I've got all the large copper coils off, which are over there, and I've got all the cast alloy, well, they're not cast, they're extruded aluminium heat sinks, which are on the scales. So they weigh out at 1.5 kilos. Cast aluminium, let's work on $1. It's been a fair bit lower than that, but I think it's come back up a bit. So $1.50 there. We'll weigh up the coils and see how much they weigh. There was the big coils, there was transformers as well, and there was also quite a few relays underneath little black plastic covers. Now, if you really want to keep going, you can get the little contact points off the relays. They are a large percentage of sterling, well, a large percentage of silver. They're an alloy usually of silver, and they use cadmium and all sorts of other metals in there, but they are a high percentage of silver. Sometimes I clip them off and put them in a jar, sometimes I don't, just depends on my frame of mind. But if we sold all those just as transformers, you'd get around about 50 cents a kilo. We're at 1 1/3 kilos, so we're looking at, I don't know, say about 60 to 70 cents. So we've only just really got to $2 by taking those things off, whereas we would have got $1 for the board complete. However, I'm going to send that board now out to the transfer station with my next load out there, and so I've now got $2 with much less storage space, and that's more important to me. The other thing is that I am actually melting a bit of aluminium and making a few projects from that, so the extruded aluminium does melt very well and it's nice and clean, so I may sell it or I may keep it to melt. Now, if you want to microscope further, you can certainly pull off some smaller coils. There's quite a few of them there, but they do take time to get off. I only spent about 10 minutes getting my extra value. It would take a lot longer to start pulling off all the little things. You can certainly take all the chips. Little ICs do pay very well per kilo, but it takes an enormous amount of them to make a kilo. Likewise, these Mosfet transistors are mostly copper. And if you dig your side cutters into the back of these ones, you'll find that they are copper. But you know, I don't know if the scrapyards actually take those, because there's a lot of plastic and whatnot with the copper, and I don't have time to muck around with too many small things. So yep, there's no real value on that for me otherwise. As I mentioned earlier, the big capacitors are really no scrap value. They are aluminium cased, but there's very little aluminium in them. Most of the interior is going to be various compounds and wax and all sorts of stuff to make the capacitors actually work. So no other value in there. That will go out to the transfer station as far as I'm concerned. Now we've finished scrapping everything out. I've ended up with a fair tub of hardware, which most of you know I can sell, so that's worth some value to me. What I might do is organise it all into piles, including the computer parts, and we'll just get an idea of what value we actually got from all the stuff that we scrapped out. So here's all the assorted spoils of our little adventure. All the e-waste has been scrapped that I was going to, and we'll quickly run through what we've got here. We've got a fair pile of insulated copper wire. There's around about 1 kilo there. The case of the UPS and the PC, plus some metal brackets and whatnot, actually weighed out at about 20 kilos, and it's all nice and clean. And we'll go through the notepad in a second on values. I did pull these brackets out because I'm going to keep them. They'll be handy for shelf brackets or something in the shed. Good heavy gauge, so they'll be handy. Our pile of extruded aluminium here. This is the heatsink from the CPU. Now I won't throw that in the scrap. It's very, very light, so it doesn't amount to much money. But I might be able to make something out of that. Might be able to upcycle. Those ones I'll either scrap for about $1.50 lot, or I'll keep and melt them when I'm making something out of molten aluminium. Little battery I have to get rid of. I've got a box of batteries that'll go at the transfer station. Small pile of rubbish. That's all we got as far as rubbish goes. Not much use in any of that. We have all our copper coils and transformers. Now with the hardware, I usually get about $5 a jar full in the shop. So there's not a great deal there. And there's a little bit of brass too. I separate the brass ones and sell them in a separate jar. We have a couple of mid-grade boards that are worth saving up. I think they pay around about $1.50 a kilo. I'm not totally sure at the moment. So there's probably only about 50 cents there. That motherboard there, that works out around about $2.50 worth to sell for scrap. And I did pull a few chips off one of the boards. There was one chip, if you remember, out of the little CB, but they're really marginal value. I didn't write them down because they weigh so little. And also the silver contacts out of the relays, I clipped them off. I'll throw them in a jar, but I didn't write either of these two down because it only amounts up to a few cents. We have the RAM sticks. They pay fairly well for precious metal recovery as far as scrap goes. Those two worth around about 50 cents. But as I said, with anything 2 gig or higher, I'll try and sell. And I might get a couple of dollars each through the shop for those. The CPU is an old green fibre one, and they'll just stack up, and I'll sell them per weight, and that one equals around about 15 cents when you work it all out. So not a great deal of value. But the good thing about this stuff is that you can store up quite a lot of it value-wise and not take up much space. So that's important for those of us that are a bit short on storage space. These two larger fans are really worth very little for scrap because they're mostly plastic. There's only a small electric motor in the middle. But I'm going to keep both those for future projects. And I could even possibly put them in the shop at $1 each or something, and I'm sure someone will buy them. Another thing I'm going to keep is this sleeving over the wire loom. It's a nice mesh material. I think I might have a use for that in one of my future projects. And this other bit of sleeve is actually heat shrink tubing that's never been shrunk. I just tested the end and it does shrink down. So I'll keep that. That'll be handy in the workshop. Scanning back over here, we have a DVD or CD drive from the computer and also the power supply unit. There's so little value in those that they're not really worth anything more than dirty shred steel, so I didn't even weigh them up. But I will keep them because I'll probably do a scrap out video on those at some stage, just to show people actually what's in them. And if you're not worried about your time and you just enjoy pulling things apart, well, you know, you can still get a little bit of value out of them. So I haven't written down anything for those. The pile over the back here is the stuff I'm taking back out to the transfer station, including all plugs and various things that I'm not going to pull parts out of. So that all goes back to the crates out there. It doesn't cost me anything to take them out there. And a big pile of clean plastic to be recycled. So that's all we've got as far as our leftovers from when we've scrapped. And we'll have a look at the notepad here. I've written down all the prices, just sort of approximated, just to get even figures to work on. And of course this will depend totally on the price of scrap at any given time. But we're looking at around about $10. I didn't allow for a few little things, as I mentioned. So around about $10 return from that stuff. You can see that the motherboard's probably the best payer. And also the clean steel cases, because that UPS case was very heavy. So that's about what we get in return for that. A little bit of work, but it's fun. Particularly when you haven't pulled something apart. It's always enjoyable. If I had 100 UPSs to do, I don't think I'd be so enthused. But, you know, for the first time opening one up, it was kind of good. The other things we've got, and the better return, I mentioned 20 and 10 for those two retro 70s pieces. That's, of course, very flexible. You can ask what you want for them, really, but I think they're realistic selling prices. The clock radio will be easy to test, and if it works, I'll certainly get more for it. Now, the hard drive recorder is actually on eBay at the moment. I put it on there for $50. I let it be known that I've picked up in the ewaste, but I did plug it in and it appears to work. No remote as mentioned, and also I don't really know how to use it, but I was honest in the description. And at the moment I think it's up to $55. It's got a couple of bids. So that single thing alone will certainly make our trip out to the transfer station worthwhile. So before I finish up this video, a couple more days and that'll be finished. So I'll do a bit of a conclusion with our final price. We'll see you then. And here's my auction page. The auction finished and we had 9 bids, as you can see there, for a final price of $64. And then they had to pay postage. The listing, as you can see, and you can pause the screen if you want to read that, I was very honest in my description. I probably talked down a bit because it did seem to work fine, and I put lots of pictures on to show that, even a shot of the TV screen. I didn't know how to operate it or how to find out if there's anything on the hard drive or anything like that. So really a couple of people messaged me about it, and you know, they were basically prepared to take a punt because it was cheap enough and the guy that bought it was happy. So that's all great. So happy with that, rescued that from the waste stream, and it's gone back into hopefully a productive life. So $64, let's be conservative and just say a return of $50, allowing for PayPal and eBay fees. They won't be quite that much, but that gives us a realistic return. So that was $80 value for the stuff that doesn't get scrapped, and around $10 value for the stuff that does. So it really only took me half an hour to go out to the transfer station, and we have $90 odd worth of value. I have a couple of projects for down the track because I'm actually not going to sell those. And the whole thing is that you never really know what you're going to find out there, and that's part of the fun. It's kind of like a lucky dip sometimes. So there you go. Thanks for watching. I'll film these regularly if you'd like to see these every time I do a run out to the transfer station. If I don't find anything, I won't bother, but you know, we might get some really cool stuff at some stage. So stay tuned. Keep an eye on my channel. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.